Okay, it should be working now. Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction. So hey, I'm Maria. Um, if I seem a little stuttering or anything yet, please bear in mind that it's very early in Finland. So I just woke up. So, but I'll try to get my energy together and deliver you the presentation in an optimal way, but have some mercy if I seem a bit disorganized. But yeah, my presentation is titled "One Random Overwatch League Match Every Day 133, and I'm looking at Reddit as a place of commemoration and recollection of the Overwatch League. Um, so what I'm interested in, and what this research sort of got its start from, and by the way, I want to highlight that this is very much work in progress. So I'm quite in the early stages of this research now, but I also would like to perhaps I wanted to present this from earlier to perhaps get a feedback so I can look at the ways, think about the ways where I will take this. But yeah, so I was interested of the question that what happens when notable esport titles, esport fronts or esports leagues die? Because we know that in the fast changing landscape of esports, new esports titles and leagues emerge while old ones go out of existence. Uh, even the oldest esports games or esports leagues, they don't have that long of a lifespan. So if we are looking at this kind of ecosystem that is quite volatile on occasions in terms of especially in terms of if we don't look at the whole esports game, but we look at these tournaments, leagues, etc. Um, so what happens when these titles or leagues go out of existence? And we also know that, like in some cases, even whole esports titles are killed off, which reminds us about the power the game companies have over their games. And sort of like when these things happen, even when leagues or titles disappear, something is always left behind. And for example, the fan communities. So the fan communities might have very little influence or no influence over the fact that their favorite league or their favorite esports might go out of existence. This has happened with a lot of the games. It has happened with the games like Hero of the Storm, and it has happened with the games like Overwatch, where the Overwatch League was killed off at the officially announced in January 2024, but the fans already knew it in 2023 by the end of that Overwatch League season. Uh, so going off from that question, what happens when these esports leagues die? I look at the fan responses of the discontinuation of the Overwatch League, and I do that through examining the Reddit community r/competitive Overwatch. In my analysis, I examined how the discontinuation of the Overwatch League has affected the community, and in what way Overwatch esports continues to be in a present in that subreddit after the discontinuation of the Overwatch League. I'm utilizing the work of Adrian Parr on Deleuze and memorial culture. So the idea that sort of like memorial culture is something that it's not same as remembering, but it's something that lives with us. We're going to talk about a little bit more later, but by utilizing Adrian Parr's work on memorial culture, I demonstrate how commemorating and remembering Overwatch League is present in the different ways in the say the subreddit, and I reflect on the function of these acts for the Overwatch esports fandom. And again, I want to stress this is very much a work in progress, so we're just going to look at some of the aspects that I've been able to sort of identify so far, and hopefully I'll be able to continue the work and get a more sort of overreaching picture of what's going on with this memorial culture in the subreddit r/competitive Overwatch. So my method is I would think it's online ethnography. So I'm visiting the subreddit or competitive Overwatch frequently, but I'm also using the search function to trying to find, because of course since I started to research recently, so now when I'm visiting the and reading the posts and sort of like trying to get a sense of what's going on with the community, there's also been almost 2 years since the Overwatch League was discontinued. So I've been also using the search function to look with the search term OVL to look at those posts where people have been discussing Overwatch League since its discontinuation. But I also want to read sort of like other posts and sort of get a feeling of how Overwatch League and the memories attached to it configure with the community as a whole. In addition to that, I also draw from multi-sided ethnography of Overwatch Esports that I conducted in 2018 to 2021. So I did my PhD on sportification of esports, and I was looking at Overwatch League. So during those 3 years, um, I I frequently visited and read the subreddit in question, in addition to watching all the Overwatch League games and a lot of the different streamers. And I visited in the Overwatch League um, games in the live events and played lot, like, or watched the game a lot of itself. So I'm sort of drawing from that background that I already have from there, and that knowledge and that familiarity with, especially with the subreddit, in order to contextualize, yeah, and understand what's going on there right now. I'm thinking of like my method of analysis. I'm going to be using qualitative content analysis. Perhaps I've been thinking maybe discourse analysis as well. Uh, but I'll get to that step once I'm in a sort of like bit further in the research. But right now I'm just been going with the qualitative content analysis. So what is Overwatch League? In other words, all OVL. So Overwatch, which is a Blizzard Entertainment 2016 game, first-person team-based hero shooter. So the Overwatch esports, so the esports scene of the Overwatch was dominated by the Overwatch League from 2018 to 2024 or 2023, if you want to look at the last season of the Overwatch League, by Overwatch League, which was a franchise esports league commissioned by the developer of the game, Blizzard Entertainment. And it's also important to know that when Overwatch League was active, Blizzard held a very tight control over the Overwatch IP and drastically limited who could run Overwatch esports tournaments. So as a consequence of this policy, as a consequence, the Overwatch League was almost synonymous with Overwatch esports. There was, of course, some other sort of like lower tier leagues, like Overwatch Contenders, that happened regionally. But Overwatch League was the sort of big thing on the top of it, and a lot of tournament organizers couldn't even organize the Overwatch esports events, as it was so tightly controlled by the Blizzard. Overwatch League was global league by its name, so they attempted to draw teams from different countries, from different continents. However, most of the teams were from the United States, and in the two first season of the Overwatch League, it operated in Los Angeles Burbank, where they had a live studio. So the whole idea with the Overwatch League was that it attempted to revolutionize esports by utilizing a model adopted from franchise sports leagues. Yeah, so we can here see CBC News snippet where they talk about how Overwatch League is revolutionizing esports, and that was sort of very much the sentiment and the energy, right? The Blizzard came in with the Overwatch League. So when Overwatch League started in 2018, the first, I think, 12 teams, maybe in the first season, they had to do up to $10 million buy-ins to get into the team. So this is the get into the league. So this is the franchise model, right? And in the next season, it was rumored that the buy-ins were up to up to 60 millions. So we're talking about like tremendous amounts of money for teams to get into this franchise league. Um, in addition to this, it also adopted these sort of like naming conventions from traditional sports. So rather than having established esports franchises, there was for example, Los Angeles Valiant is as in the picture. So they would use these conventions from traditional sports, how to name the teams, right? So we would have things like New York Excelsior and Los Angeles Valiant and London Spitfire and Shanghai Dragons, etc., etc. Trying to create this fandom that is both globalized and localized. This attempt to create both globalized and localized fandoms was also evident in a way that mm, the idea with the Overwatch League was that after the 2 first years, it would go that all the teams would have their home arenas. So the idea with the Overwatch League from beginning on that all the matches are played live with live audience on site on esports arenas, and the idea was that after first year, all the teams would have built their own arenas, and uh, they would gradually move towards that model. But obviously, that did not happen because Corona happened. So, but while in the first years, Overwatch League was able to be played in front of live audience in the Burbank Arena, when Corona hit, everything went back to online, and that was also the time that Overwatch League was supposed to move to these home stand and home arena games, which was sort of like a big thing, part of its model. Well, this didn't happen. Corona happened, and Wheelist Overwatch League had already sort of struggled with popularity. It just never gained the kind of momentum its organizers would have liked, and probably its investors would have liked. But that probably was a sort of a moment, or started to be a moment of a nail in the coffin. And then Blizzard Entertainment, of course, struggling with the lawsuits. Not long after that, and probably all these affected to the fact that in 2000 last season of the Overwatch League was in 2023, and in January 23rd of January 2024, the Overwatch League was officially terminated by its creator, right? Um, so I'm interested, or I've been looking the subreddit r/competitive Overwatch. Mm, And during the Overwatch League, the subreddit r/competitive Overwatch was very active community centered around the Overwatch League. Um, and the community was sort of like, it had these statues, right? It was not just a it was a fan community, but it was not just like any fan community. It has a certain level of status, which was visible, that it was recognized by the representatives of the Overwatch League. The caster would hold Ask Me Anything's there, and we frequently reference to the subreddit while casting. So it played a pivotal role in Overwatch esports fandom. And part of this fandom was an investment to the success of the Overwatch League, with a constant sort of like emotional and also cognitive labor. Fans need to legitimize Overwatch League. So whenever there would be sort of like controversies, right? Controversies with player behavior, or anything in Overwatch League, a lot of times the members of the subreddit, of course, there were sort of like a diverging voices, but a lot of times the members of the competitive Overwatch subreddit, they would sort of like say that no, you cannot act like that, because we need to sort of like, this is our chance to show that esports are real sports. We need to support Overwatch League. So they would be all the time sort of like making this labor to the extent that some would also even talk about that you need to watch the streams and you need to buy the merchandise to support the Overwatch League. And once the Overwatch League was discontinued, and largely seen having been failed, the fandom had to come to terms with this and with the changes it brought to the landscape of Overwatch esports. So I started thinking this with this sort of like with the idea of trauma. So where do we start when we begin to think about memorial culture? How do we collectively grapple with trauma as it gnaws its way through the social field? So I'm drawing from Adrian Poor's memorial culture here. Memorial culture for Poor is a utopian memory thinking, one where culture inhabits the disruptive dimensions of traumatic memories, which also entails a little bit of forgetting while simultaneously bringing forth of a sense of agency. So in other words, it's those ways we cope or we try to cope with events that have been shocking or traumatic. And of course, when we talk about the discontinuation of the Overwatch League, it's not uh, in a similar manner traumatic than some of the examples Part talks about, like Holocaust. But then there's still this sort of fun sense of shock, and then it is sort of like a loss for the collective fan identity. And according to the Adrian Parr, memory culture, the affective memory, that's part of how memory culture is formed through three syntheses of desire. So for Parr, as for Deleuze, desire is something that is also always social. So our desire is not our desire, right? But it is something that is beyond us. It's not personal, right? So Parr talks about three syntheses of desire. There's the connective synthesis, which is the productive dimension of libidinal energies, affects, and forces, and the disjunctive synthesis, which refers to the breaks occurring in a flow of these energies and their subsequent recording. Finally, there's conjunctive synthesis, which sort of brings it all together. So whatever we have, this like these continuities and continuities, how this affective memory, so something like a flow that comes from the event, right? So it's what comes after from the event and from the memory of it. Once we sort of like but once it becomes sort of a conjunctive synthesis, it's a consumption produces a subject or subjectivity, so it sort of comes together as a thing. And according to Parr, this synthesis of desire, they seize upon energies or force of singular memory, and herein lies the sort of significance of Freudian notion of libido, right? And they organize it into distinct periods, causes, identities, and hierarchical temporal relations. And there's two types of investment of memory here for Parr, and other one is a schizoid, and other one is fascist. And the sort of like difference between there is that the fascist investment of memory, it sort of like tries to deal with the trauma by sort of suppressing it, right? So if you think about schizo, it sort of like lives with the trauma. It doesn't try to make it existing, but it's a fascist form. It tries to sort of repress it. It's a sort of like in the authoritarian mode. You repress the trauma. You do not deal with it. So yeah. So this is sort of like the theoretical framework I'm trying to work with when I'm looking at this. So let's jump at the preliminary findings. And as I said, this is very much just like early stages of the work. But some of the things I've been looking at. So one of the things was sort of like the initial reactions when the members of the subreddit or the fans, however we want to call them, realized that the Overwatch League is ending. So we have this description of sort of like quite heavy shock, right? Talking about grown as man crying right now, and I don't care. I've been watching Overwatch League since high school, man. I don't want it to go. It is so devastating. Despite all its issues, nothing has hit the same spot for me that the Overwatch League does. Nothing has brought me the same comfort, joy, excitement, heartache. That's down to every last person that's been pouring their all into, exemplified by the faces of right here. Seeing them band together and cried like this has crushed part of me. So this was a commentary on sort of like when 2023 there was the final match of the Overwatch League, and the talent came together and made this video and gave this speech that sort of made it clear that the Overwatch League is ending. And this is from a thread they subreddit users were commenting on that. So what we can gather from here, there's a sort of quite a big shock of what have happened, and people were talking quite extensively, right, about how Overwatch League has been a big part of their life for these years, and how they've been really shocked it ending, even though there's a sort of like hope as well. Like here, one of the commentators say, "Sorry if it's cringe, but this and the credits videos had me crying. Through all the highs and all the shit shows, I love this stupid league. Whatever comes next, I hope it brings me nearly as much joy." Right? Um, so there is a hope within this, so there's an expectation, and that was more sort of discussed in the comments. So in contrast to this, when I start looking sort of like what's going on with the subreddit right now, it's quite quiet. There is not that much discussions. There is discussions around the Champions League and the Overwatch World Cup, but it's not to an extent it was during the Overwatch League. And oftentimes in these discussions, you also draw back to memories from the Overwatch League, which is really interesting. So you're trying to continue these sort of like story arcs from the Overwatch League. And there is this ways of trying to bring Overwatch League as part of it. And one of the things that I found really interesting is the one random Overwatch League match every day. So there's this same handle that posts these matches every day. So every day, I think that this is one of the latest, 2047. So I think we are up to almost sorry, 247. Maybe we're up to 250 now. But this handle keeps posting this every day, and I found that extremely fascinating. And sometimes there is some discussion in comments, and sometimes not. And I'm a sort of like in early theorizing. This is a form of schizoid investment of memory. Sorry, there says if memory, but it should say of memory. I'm just fixing it. There we go. Of memory, because it breaks the temporal order, right? Because a lot of time, what is sort of like very traditional in this subreddit, that when you have a match day, you would have these match details posted, the link to the match, and then there would be a comments, and this would be always in the day of the match. But by posting these old Overwatch games, this person is sort of like breaking that temporal order and disturbing it by bringing always the old Overwatch League to the present day. So I found this very interesting, and need to keep looking more into it. But yeah, so as I said, very early stages, still working on it. Some conclusive remark is that, well, obviously fans were very shaken by the end of the Overwatch League, and this sort of a shock or almost trauma still continues to be very visible in the subreddit r/competitive Overwatch, and it's not surprising because they had sort of like years of cognitive and affective labor and sort of investment to the league, and that they are finding ways to cope. And I think memory culture can be a useful lens through which examine this, how they cope with these changes. Thank you.
Stream. I have one question from Toby asking, even though the OWL didn't work super well, teams were able to get some super fans. Did you see something in your data, how they dealt with the disappearance of their teams?
I think I heard it. For some reason, the sound is coming to me as double. Maybe I have something open, but I think it was question is like the team. Some teams had these super fans, and how these super fans dealt with the disappearance of the Overwatch League. So I haven't seen like anything very concrete yet, but I think I'll get there once I get deeper into this. And I think like maybe this sort of like the even this is not team specific, but the handle that keeps posting these Overwatch League matches. I think that's a sort of like indicator that there might be um, some super fun behavior there. So, and I'm also thinking sort of expanding this maybe to a service. So I'm hoping to that way to really get into those sort of like memories, because now I'm looking more sort of like practices, but also to sort of like memories fans have of the Overwatch League. I think like one of the things I noticed that people still talk about sort of like they bring out these specific players or specific plays, and there's a lot of these sort of like continuously bringing these topics up when they're talking, when there's a sort of like a match chat of the different game, they keep bringing up certain players or certain teams up. So I mean, I think this is sort of maybe that can be a way of trying to keep it alive, trying to keep that investment alive, right? Trying to cope with what has been lost. But that's a really interesting question, and I will be looking into that more. Thank you. Thank you.